my goodness gracious, let me tell you the news. My head's been wet with the midnight dew. I've been down on bended knee, talking to the man from Galilee.
This is Hardtime.info. Now, when you're in trouble with the law, we can give you practical ideas of how to help yourself. And that's what this is all about. Sometimes you need a lawyer. Let me tell you from the start, I'm going to say it all the time. When you need a lawyer, get the very best you can possibly get. A good lawyer is going to make the difference. And when you need a lawyer, especially with criminal cases, get the best you can afford. So, having said that, let me just give you kind of an overview today, although what we're looking at is doing a lot of different topics that will help you in whenever you get in trouble with the law. And my hope is that you will use this to your benefit to begin a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at things, a new way of examining why is it that I got in trouble. And there's a number of different reasons. It may not be your fault whatsoever. But we know there's criminal law, and that's what we're going to deal with in this series mostly. But there's also civil law, and sometimes you get in a criminal case and then you'll get sued civilly as well. There's constitutional law, there's labor laws, there's all kinds of administrative laws, there's property laws, contract laws, and tax laws. We can go on and on. There's so many laws in our land. But really, what is a law? A law is just a set of rules that are created and are enforceable either by government or by social institutions that really regulate behavior. And that's really what the idea of it. So there's all kinds of different laws. We could also get off into laws of science, statutes, all sorts of different things, contracts. We're going to deal in this series primarily with criminal law. So there's 5 categories of criminal law. And you might have just gotten a ticket, a traffic ticket. That's usually just an infraction. Now, it can be something higher. There are those misdemeanor felonies that are called wobblers. Sometimes they charge as a felony, sometimes as a misdemeanor. And then, of course, there are misdemeanor offenses and felony offenses. What does that all have to do? That all has to do with the degree of punishment. Now, I am not a lawyer, but I have a lot of experience in the law. So from very, very practical aspects. So I hope to share some of my expertise and some of my ideas, and I'll give you many, many practical helps. Now, let's just say you have a loved one that's in prison. In future videos, we're going to be talking about how can you benefit and how can this person benefit from what he's going through, what they're learning. In this, we're going to talk about what happens for a ticket. We'll get a video on how do I fight a ticket when I've been wrongly accused, wrongly ticketed for a vehicle. What if I have to go to court? What do I say in court? We're going to talk about practical things. And again, what are the 7 principles of criminal law? Well, it's the principle of legality. That's number 1. They want to make sure that they're keeping things legal. And then that the guilty will be held responsible. And then that has a portionality. More and more in our laws of the land, they're taking those proportions out of the hands of judges, and mandatory sentences do that. Takes it out of the hands of a judge where they can consider how much they should be, a person should be given for whatever the offense. There's also the inadmissibility of certain responsibilities, such as you can't be held again for the very same crime. The area of humanism, that each person has value and each person has worth. There's also the idea of equality of citizens. And that's an important aspect before the law. And the personal responsibility. When do I have to take personal responsibility? And there is the inevitability of punishment. And we'll be talking about that in all different lengths, all the way from having the death sentence, being sentenced maybe to life without the possibility of parole. We're going to be talking about long prison sentences and as well as shorter prison sentences, or just being under house arrest, just getting an infraction and how to either pay a fine or maybe have to serve restitution. Those are all aspects that we're going to be dealing with in future videos under Hardtime.info. I'll say it again, when you need a good lawyer, get the very best you can afford. Sometimes you get in trouble, and that's what you have to have. You've got to have a good lawyer. This video series is not legal advice. This is only practical advice from personal experience. I want that to be well understood, because I don't want you to go out and say, well, Frank told me that this is the way it's going to be, because every state has its own laws. And we're going to be looking at now, what are the levels of law? Because the Constitution is the highest level of law. And if you were to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, I did get to take my case to the Supreme Court, it has to be for some kind of a constitutional question. So in all of those, and then what are the lower courts? Where can you find relief? And I've been through all of the various courts, as well as having worked on both sides of this issue. So I have a lot of experience, and I want to just share with you some of my personal experience. And of course, my goal in these videos is to help you get a right thinking process. And I'm a Christian, and I'm going to unashamedly tell you that my purpose is to help you to understand that law is something that was ordained by God, and we're going to reap what we sow. Some would say if it's karma, some will use different terms. That's okay. But I think that we reap what we sow. And that's why we want to come out of this, whatever we're going through, with the very best of understanding and improving ourselves, improving who we are, thinking right, changing our mindset. So now let's move into our understanding, a basic understanding of laws and the courts. We're talking about the hierarchy of law here and the order of authority in the courts. That's going to be important, especially as we get into a portion where if you have to write your own writ, you must meet each particular court's rulings and findings, and they have very different directions and instructions for each court. So we'll have to go through that in a future time. That's why it's best, if you can, to get a lawyer to do that. If you cannot afford a lawyer, you can do that on your own, and courts do give some leeway for someone that's fighting their case on their own. Remember that laws are enacted and enforced. Their interpretation is given, especially in the U.S. Supreme Court, but those are at different levels, the federal, the state, and the local level. They'll all decide the applicability and the enforceability for each one of those laws or rules or codes. All of those things can be questioned and fought because your U.S. constitutional rights cannot be violated. Now, all three levels are going to contain, first, a constitution. Now, many cities and counties just have a charter. It's the same thing as a constitution, and some cities will have their own constitution. There's also a legislative body. Maybe it's a city council or county council, or it might be your state legislative body, your senates and assemblies. There's also that in the federal level. Then there are individual agencies, whether it's a police agency, whether it's a food and drug administration or something like that. There are many, many different agencies on all of the various levels, and sometimes they need rules or codes to help them in their enforcement and to legislate them as well and rule them how they should act also. And so we have the highest law of the land, the U.S. Constitution. And then there's laws, those statutes that are enacted by Congress, whether it's the Senate or the Assembly. Sometimes we see that there are statutes, laws that the president tries to put through. We have that threefold form of government. But then there are also rules by federal agencies, like the Food and Drug Administration or Homeland Security, something like that. Those federal agencies that are enacting rules and codes to help us and to designate how far their authority goes as well, what they have authority over or can make rules and judgments on. Then on a state level, you'll also have a state constitution, and those laws by your state legislators, whether that be the governor or whether it be the Congress of your state. And then there are also rules by state agencies, whether it's the traffic department, whatever name they might go by, or corrections or something like that. They're going to come up with codes and rules to help them in their own designated area of what they're going to do, as well as what's going to happen if you've gone outside of their bounds. And then we have county charters or constitution and city charters, or that is their constitution. Sometimes they'll call it a constitution. The county has a greater weight over the city or the municipality within that county. All of those city constitution or charter must meet and follow under the county charter, the county constitution. Then there are local laws and ordinances within that city or county. Maybe they're parking regulations. There are going to be rules and codes by local agencies. As an example, parking meters or lights where they have a red light law and cameras on the red lights and things like that to help enforce various laws. Well, those are all going to be done by city or county government. Now let's move into the idea again of the courts, because the higher the court, the more important, or what's considered the greater weight of their findings. So you can read of all of the U.S. Supreme Court findings. Some are published and some are not. But there are various constitutions and statutes, laws, codes, rules that are interpreted in these decisions by these courts. That's, of course, what the Supreme Court does, or maybe a district circuit court or a federal district court. They're all going to decide whether or not some constitutional error has occurred. Now, that can happen both on a federal and a state level. So it's important to recognize the higher the court, the greater weight for their finding. When we get into writing writs, we'll talk much more about that, of using federalized state laws to help back our arguments. So as I just said, when you're fighting a case, the higher the court ruling, the stronger the argument is going to be. Local governments and agencies, sometimes in an effort to take care of an immediate problem, they fail to follow the necessary procedures before enacting rules or codes and laws. Sometimes they've failed to have a public hearing, or they failed to take it to the Office of Administrative Law, something like that. The Office of Administrative Law, and they have those, they're called different things in each state, make sure that it does not counteract any other law that's already enforced, or that we're not duplicating laws. So sometimes local governments and agencies forget to follow the procedures and follow their own laws in order to take care of an immediate problem. There are three major divisions of law, and this is what we're mainly concerned about. Although there are many, many divisions of law, three major laws that we're looking at: criminal, civil, and administrative. These are the areas that will most of the time affect us. These are the things that are going to touch our lives. And these three major divisions of law are something that we're talking about. So let's look again, because there is that hierarchy of courts: the U.S. Supreme Court, the federal circuit courts, the federal district courts, and then you get the state Supreme Court and the state district courts. Now, some states might have additional courts. We'll look at that just a little bit, but this is the primary hierarchy of courts. In the hierarchy of courts, some states have that additional level, such as a circuit court, but then you get to the county courts. You have the county superior court, a county municipal court. You may have traffic courts, civil courts. So you'll have various courts within the county according to what they recognize as their needs. Now understand, because of the heavy caseloads that are in the courts today, it will take years and years. I was 15 years fighting one U.S. constitutional issue. 15 years to get all the way from the Superior Court all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So now understand that there are people, there are clerks and laws that have been enacted to lessen the caseloads in the courts, such as giving time limits. You'll only have 1 year to file. This is where you'll really need an attorney. You need to do your homework. You need to find out what are the rules of court and how long do I have. Some things they take off the statute of limitations and you can file your entire life. Other things have maybe a 1 year, a 7-year statute of limitations. So each one has to be looked at in particular, and that was really enacted to help lessen the court cases and take the load off of the judges and the courts. All right, we're going to close out, but I hope that you enjoyed this whole series. I hope that it's very helpful to you. And of course, my goal is unashamedly to help you get a better mindset, to come out of this as a better person. And as a Christian, I believe that begins by accepting Jesus Christ personally as Lord and Savior. He'll make you a new creation. I hope that you'll subscribe and that you'll ask me questions. I would love to share the hope that we have in Jesus Christ, the hope of eternal life, and how He made such a difference in my life, and He can make a difference in your life too. Whatever you're going through, whatever trials and struggles you may be going through, we want to help you. We want you to just be able to come through this, whatever you're going through, and come out of it in a much greater sense, with a much greater abilities and being better for the whole experience. So we're going to close out now, and I hope that you'll subscribe. I hope that you'll like us, or that you'll share, whatever it might be, that you let others know that we're here to help. So next video is going to be on fighting a traffic ticket. Okay, thanks. Take care.